Anna had always been a joyful person, full of dreams and faith. She grew up in a Christian home, where she had a deep relationship with God. However, at the age of 25, her life took an unexpected turn when she faced the betrayal of a very close friend. This friend had gotten involved with Anna's boyfriend, and the pain was immense. Anger and heartbreak consumed Anna, and she distanced herself from everyone around her, locking herself in her own world. For a long time, the faith that once seemed solid began to waver. Though she continued attending church, Anna no longer felt the same connection to God. Each day, bitterness overtook her heart, and she couldn't understand why her spiritual life was stagnant. Her prayers became empty words, and the smile that once was so common on her face became rare. Anna felt lost, unsure of how to move forward. It was on a Sunday morning, after months of emotional suffering, that Anna heard a message that would change her life forever. The pastor spoke about the power of forgiveness. He said, "There is no salvation without forgiveness. If you don't release forgiveness, your soul won't find peace. Forgiving is not for the person who hurt you, it's for you to find healing and freedom. Forgiveness is the first step to your salvation." These words deeply touched Anna. She could no longer ignore the weight in her heart. The pastor wasn't just talking about forgiving her boyfriend or her friend, but also about forgiving herself for allowing anger to dominate her life for so long. For the first time, Anna felt she had a choice: continue living with bitterness or release that burden and seek the spiritual healing she desperately needed. On her way home, Anna began to reflect. She remembered everything God had done for her, how He had always loved her, even when she strayed. It was then that she made a sincere prayer, asking for strength to forgive, both others and herself. The pain didn't disappear instantly, but Anna felt something new starting to happen in her heart. In the following days, Anna made the decision that she could no longer live as a prisoner of her past. She reached out to her friend and with tears in her eyes told her she forgave her. She also reconciled with her boyfriend and others who had been affected by her pain. With each forgiveness given, a part of her heart healed. Her faith began to bloom again. And most importantly, she finally found the inner peace she had been missing for so long. Forgiveness set her free. She didn't just reconcile with others, but with God and, most importantly, with herself. Anna realized that by releasing forgiveness, she was also releasing her spiritual healing, allowing salvation to flow freely in her life. She understood that forgiveness wasn't just a moral choice, but a divine key that unlocked the doors to her own renewal and salvation. Today, Anna lives a life full of purpose, joy, and spiritual healing. She knows that forgiveness is the secret that set her soul free, and each day she draws closer to her true essence in Christ. Anna's life had always seemed perfect on the outside. Growing up in a Christian home, surrounded by love and support, she had developed a strong faith in God from an early age. Her relationship with God was the cornerstone of her existence, and she believed in His power to guide her through every obstacle. She had big dreams, and her faith always kept her grounded, even when life got tough. At 25, Anna's world began to crumble. The betrayal of her close friend hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her devastated and confused. The person she trusted most had broken her heart in the worst way possible. Not only had this friend stolen her boyfriend, but Anna also felt like she had lost the person she thought she could confide in, someone who had been like a sister to her. Anger and betrayal clouded her mind. For the first time, Anna couldn't find peace within herself. Her thoughts became consumed with revenge and bitterness. She felt as though the foundation of her life, built on trust and love, had been shattered into irreparable pieces. She started withdrawing from her family, friends, and even her church. The people who had once been a source of strength and encouragement now felt distant, like strangers who could never understand the depth of her pain. Despite her internal chaos, Anna continued attending church. She thought that maybe, through the rituals and routines, she could find some sense of normalcy. But as the weeks passed, she realized that something inside her had changed. She no longer felt the connection she once had with God. Her prayers, once passionate and sincere, felt empty and forced. Her faith seemed to have evaporated, replaced by a deep sense of disillusionment. Anna didn't know what to do. The woman who had once walked through life with a heart full of faith was now a shadow of her former self. Her smile, which had been so natural, was now rare, and her spirit felt drained. She was lost in a sea of emotions: anger, sadness, and confusion. Her faith had been the anchor that held her steady, but now it felt like a distant memory, something she couldn't quite grasp anymore. But in the midst of her despair, Anna didn't give up on God. Deep down, she still believed that He was there, even if she couldn't feel His presence in the same way. She continued attending church, hoping that one day the pain would subside and she would be able to reclaim the peace and faith she once had. Yet with each passing day, the bitterness inside her only seemed to grow stronger. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, but she didn't know what it was. One Sunday morning, after months of spiritual emptiness, Anna sat in the church pew, her heart heavy with the weight of unresolved pain. She had been attending services regularly, but each Sunday felt the same: distant, empty, and disconnected. It was as if her heart had grown cold, and the words of the pastor seemed to bounce off her soul, leaving no lasting impression. But on that day, something was different. The pastor's words cut through the fog of her bitterness, piercing straight into the depths of her heart. He was speaking about forgiveness, its power, its necessity, and its role in spiritual healing. Anna had heard these words countless times before, but today they felt different. Today they felt personal. The pastor said, "There is no salvation without forgiveness. If you don't release forgiveness, your soul won't find peace. Forgiving is not for the person who hurt you. It's for you to find healing and freedom. Forgiveness is the first step to your salvation." Anna's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the truth of these words reverberating through her entire being. For the first time in months, she felt as though someone had finally spoken to her directly. It was as if the pastor had been sent by God to deliver a message just for her. She had been so focused on the betrayal, the hurt, and the injustice of her situation that she had neglected the one thing that could set her free: forgiveness. As the pastor continued speaking, Anna's mind raced. She had been holding on to so much anger for so long, unwilling to forgive her friend, her boyfriend, and even herself. But now she began to understand that forgiveness wasn't just for the person who wronged her. It was for her own healing. By holding on to the bitterness, she was only allowing it to poison her soul, keeping her from experiencing the peace and joy she so desperately longed for. The words "forgiveness is the first step to your salvation" echoed in her mind. Anna realized that if she wanted to move forward, to reclaim her faith, and to heal her broken heart, she needed to release the anger and embrace forgiveness. It was the only way she could find the peace that had been eluding her for so long. But forgiveness was not easy. Anna knew that forgiving her friend and her boyfriend would not be simple. The wounds ran deep and the pain was still fresh. Yet in that moment, she felt a stirring in her heart, a quiet whisper telling her that she had a choice. She could continue living with bitterness, allowing it to control her life, or she could let go and choose the path of healing through forgiveness. For the first time in a long while, Anna felt a glimmer of hope. She knew that forgiveness was the key to unlocking the peace and spiritual healing she had been longing for. It wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to take the first step. The journey of forgiveness was about to begin. The road to forgiveness was not an easy one for Anna. Though she had heard the pastor's words and felt their truth deeply, she still wrestled with her emotions. Her heart was heavy with pain, and the thought of forgiving those who had betrayed her seemed almost impossible. How could she let go of the hurt that had defined her for so long? How could she simply forgive and move on? Anna's internal struggle was real. Her friend's betrayal had felt like a deep cut to her soul, and the wounds left by her boyfriend's actions had shattered her trust. For months, she had lived with this constant pain, unable to escape the memories of the hurt and the betrayal. Forgiveness felt like an unimaginable task, and yet deep within, she knew it was the only way to heal. That evening, as she sat in her quiet room, Anna began to reflect on everything she had been through. She thought about the years of love and friendship that had once been shared with her friend. She remembered the moments of joy with her boyfriend and the plans they had made for the future. All of that had been destroyed in an instant, leaving her with a broken heart and a shattered sense of trust. But as Anna sat in her solitude, she realized that the more she held on to the anger, the more it controlled her. It consumed her thoughts and her energy, leaving her with nothing but emptiness. She could no longer ignore the fact that holding on to unforgiveness was only prolonging her pain. She couldn't move forward in her life until she let go of the weight that was holding her back. The only way to heal was to release the bitterness that had taken root in her heart. But Anna wasn't just forgiving others. She also had to forgive herself. For months, she had blamed herself for everything that had happened. She felt guilty for allowing herself to be hurt, for not seeing the betrayal coming, and for letting her emotions take over. She had been angry with herself for being weak and vulnerable. But now, in the quiet of her room, Anna began to understand something profound. Forgiveness was not just for the people who had hurt her, it was also for herself. She needed to forgive herself for holding on to the anger, for allowing it to control her life. By forgiving herself, she could break free from the chains of guilt and shame that had kept her captive. The decision to forgive was not a one-time choice for Anna. It was a journey, a process of healing that would take time. She knew that forgiveness wasn't an instant fix for her broken heart, but it was the first step toward healing. Anna prayed for the strength to forgive, for the courage to release the anger that had been weighing her down. She prayed for peace, for the ability to see her situation through the lens of grace rather than resentment. In that moment, Anna made the choice to forgive, not because it was easy, but because it was the only way to reclaim her peace and her faith. She knew that forgiveness was the key to unlocking the spiritual healing she so desperately needed. And so she took a deep breath, made the decision, and released the anger that had held her captive for so long. Anna knew that forgiveness would not be a quick fix, but it was the beginning of a journey toward healing, freedom, and ultimately salvation. Anna's decision to forgive was the first step toward a new beginning. Though she had made the choice to release her anger, the journey was far from over. Forgiveness, she realized, was not a one-time event. It was a process that required patience, prayer, and emotional resilience. Each day, Anna had to make the conscious decision to let go of her bitterness, choosing healing over the wounds that had once defined her. The first step was confronting the people who had hurt her. Anna knew that in order to truly forgive, she had to face the source of her pain. For so long, she had avoided her friend and boyfriend, unable to look them in the eye, let alone speak to them. But now, with a heart ready for healing, Anna realized that this was the necessary step to free herself from the burden of unforgiveness. She reached out to her friend, the one who had betrayed her so deeply. Anna's hands shook as she dialed the number. The pain still stung, but she had made up her mind. She could no longer live with the weight of resentment. Her heart was ready to heal, and forgiveness was the only way forward. When her friend answered, Anna's voice trembled as she said, "I want you to know that I forgive you. I've held on to anger for too long, and it's time for me to let go." Her friend's response was one of surprise and gratitude. They spoke for a few minutes, acknowledging the pain that had been caused but also recognizing the need for healing. As the conversation ended, Anna felt a weight lift from her chest. She had taken a courageous step toward healing, and though the pain was still there, she knew that forgiveness had begun to do its work. The next step was reaching out to her boyfriend. This was the hardest part for Anna. The betrayal had cut deeply, and her heart still ached from the broken trust. But she knew that in order to move forward in her spiritual journey, she had to forgive him as well. The process wasn't easy. It wasn't a matter of simply saying the words, "I forgive you." It was about truly releasing the anger and hurt that had festered inside her for so long. Anna met with him, and though every part of her wanted to scream in anger, she chose a different path. She took a deep breath, and with sincerity in her heart, she told him, "I forgive you. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. I can't carry this pain anymore." Her voice cracked as she spoke, but there was a sense of peace in her words. For the first time in months, she felt lighter, as though a burden had been removed from her heart. The act of forgiving her friend and her boyfriend was not the end of the process. It was only the beginning. Anna still had to reconcile with herself. For so long, she had blamed herself for what had happened. She had questioned her worth and wondered if she had somehow invited the betrayal into her life. But as Anna continued her journey of forgiveness, she realized that she had to forgive herself too. Forgiving herself was perhaps the hardest part. Anna had spent so many months in self-blame, thinking that if she had done something differently, perhaps things would have turned out differently. But the truth was, no amount of self-blame would change the past. The only way forward was to release the guilt and shame that had held her back. She prayed, asking God to help her forgive herself and to heal the deep wounds of insecurity and doubt that had taken root in her heart. It was a slow process, but with each prayer, Anna felt the burden begin to lift. She realized that forgiveness wasn't just a choice for others, it was a choice for herself. By forgiving herself, she could free her heart from the chains of guilt, allowing space for healing, peace, and ultimately, spiritual restoration. As Anna continued to walk the path of forgiveness, she began to notice a gradual but profound shift within her. At first, the change was subtle, an inner peace that she hadn't felt in months, a calmness that seemed to envelop her heart whenever she let go of a lingering resentment. Each act of forgiveness, whether it was forgiving others or herself, felt like a weight lifting off her soul. Anna realized that forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of anger or resentment. It was about opening her heart to healing. The more she forgave, the more she felt her spirit begin to mend. The bitterness that had once consumed her began to fade, replaced by a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in a long time. Forgiveness, she now understood, was not just a moral obligation. It was a gateway to spiritual healing. Though Anna's heart was beginning to heal, the journey wasn't without its challenges. Every now and then, memories of the betrayal would resurface, and with them, the old feelings of hurt and anger. But Anna had learned that forgiveness was a process, and healing didn't happen overnight. When the old wounds flared up, she would remind herself of the decision she had made. She had chosen to forgive, and every time the pain resurfaced, she would make the conscious decision to let it go again. It wasn't always easy, but each time she chose forgiveness, she felt her heart grow stronger. The more Anna forgave, the more she experienced a renewed sense of faith. She began to feel God's presence in her life once again. The disconnection she had felt for so long started to fade as her faith was restored. One step at a time. She realized that forgiveness had been the missing piece all along, the key that had unlocked the door to her spiritual healing. As she released the pain and embraced forgiveness, she felt God's love flooding her heart once more. One evening, as Anna sat quietly in prayer, she reflected on how far she had come. She had started this journey consumed by bitterness, unsure of how to heal. But now she was filled with a sense of peace and renewal. The anger that had once controlled her life no longer held power over her. She had freed herself from the chains of unforgiveness, and in doing so, she had allowed herself to experience the full extent of God's healing grace. Anna had learned that forgiveness wasn't just a decision she made once. It was something she would have to choose every day. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. Each day, she made the conscious decision to forgive, to let go of the anger, and to embrace the peace that came with it. With every act of forgiveness, her heart became more whole, more open to God's love and healing. Anna was no longer the same person she had been when she first started her journey. She had been transformed. Her faith had been restored, her heart healed, and her soul set free. Forgiveness had been the key to her spiritual renewal, and she was now living proof of its power. She understood now that forgiveness wasn't just a moral act. It was a divine gift, one that allowed her to experience the fullness of God's grace and healing in her life. As Anna's heart continued to heal, she began to notice changes in her relationships. The forgiveness she had extended to her friend and boyfriend had not only freed her spirit, but it had also paved the way for reconciliation. For the first time in a long time, Anna found herself willing to open her heart to the people she had once pushed away. She realized that forgiveness had the power to restore relationships, even those that had been broken by betrayal and hurt. Anna reached out to those she had distanced herself from. She knew that reconciliation was an important part of her healing journey. It wasn't enough to forgive in her heart. She had to actively work toward healing the relationships that had been fractured by her pain. Slowly but surely, Anna began to rebuild her connections with others. It was not always easy, and there were moments when the old wounds threatened to resurface. But Anna was committed to the path of healing, both for herself and for the people around her. She started with her friend, the one who had hurt her the most. Anna had forgiven her, But now it was time to rebuild trust. It wasn't a quick fix, and it didn't happen overnight. But the more they communicated, the more Anna saw the possibility of restoring their friendship. Anna understood that reconciliation wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing to move forward with grace and understanding. She began to realize that forgiveness wasn't just a means of releasing her pain. It was a way to restore her relationships and to build something stronger than before. Her relationship with her boyfriend also began to change. Although the trust had been broken, Anna was no longer consumed by bitterness. She realized that forgiveness was not about excusing the hurtful actions that had taken place. It was about choosing to love in spite of the pain. Over time, as both Anna and her boyfriend worked toward rebuilding trust, they began to see their relationship in a new light. Forgiveness had opened the door for healing, and while the process was long and difficult, they both knew that they were on the path to restoration. But reconciliation didn't just happen with others. Anna also worked on reconciling with herself. For so long, she had carried guilt and shame for allowing herself to be hurt. She had blamed herself for the betrayal, wondering what she could have done differently. But as Anna continued to walk in forgiveness, she realized that healing required not only forgiving others, but also forgiving herself. She had to let go of the guilt and accept that she was not responsible for the choices others made. It was in this space of self-reconciliation that Anna began to experience true renewal. She had been so focused on the betrayal and the pain it caused that she had forgotten about her own worth. As she forgave herself, she began to recognize her own value and beauty once more. She started to see herself through God's eyes, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a beloved daughter of God, worthy of love, healing, and restoration. The more Anna forgave and reconciled with others and herself, the more she felt a sense of renewal in every area of her life. Her faith, once wavering, was now stronger than ever. Her heart, once filled with bitterness, was now overflowing with love and peace. She knew that forgiveness had been the key to unlocking the healing she had longed for, and she was now living in the fullness of that healing. As Anna's journey of forgiveness continued, she began to see its impact not only in her own heart, but in her relationships with others and her everyday life. Forgiveness had become more than just an emotional release. It had become a way of living. She realized that forgiveness wasn't a one-time event or a temporary decision. It was a lifelong practice, one that would shape how she interacted with the world around her. In the days that followed, Anna noticed that she was less reactive to the small offenses that would have once triggered her anger. The little things that used to frustrate her no longer had the same power over her. Whether it was a harsh word from a friend, a misunderstanding at work, or a minor inconvenience, Anna found herself responding with grace rather than resentment. She had learned that forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of major betrayals. It was also about choosing to release the small grievances that, over time, could build up and harden her heart. Her new outlook on forgiveness began to transform the way she viewed conflict. Anna had once believed that holding on to anger was a form of self-protection, that if she didn't allow herself to feel anger, she would be weak or vulnerable. But through her journey of forgiveness, Anna realized that holding on to anger only kept her trapped in the past, unable to move forward. She understood that true strength came not from holding on to resentment, but from choosing to let it go. In every conflict, she now saw forgiveness as the key to freedom, both for herself and for those involved. Forgiveness also began to affect Anna's relationships in powerful ways. As she chose to forgive, she noticed that the people around her were more willing to open up and be vulnerable. Her willingness to extend grace created an environment where others felt safe to do the same. The walls that had once separated Anna from her friends, family, and even her co-workers began to crumble. Forgiveness was healing not only her own heart, but also the hearts of those she interacted with. One day, as Anna was talking with a friend, the topic of forgiveness came up. Her friend was struggling with a betrayal from a family member, and Anna, having walked through her own journey of healing, was able to offer words of wisdom. She shared how forgiveness had transformed her life, how it had freed her from bitterness and resentment, and how it had allowed her to experience a deeper connection with God. Anna's friend, touched by her words, began to open her heart to the possibility of forgiving the person who had hurt her. Anna realized that forgiveness wasn't just about her own healing. It was about sharing that healing with others. By choosing to forgive, she had become a vessel of grace, extending the same mercy that God had shown her to those around her. She understood that forgiveness wasn't a burden to bear alone. It was a gift to be shared, one that could bring peace and restoration to others as well as to herself. As Anna continued to live out the power of forgiveness, she saw how it deepened her relationship with God. The more she forgave, the closer she drew to Him. She began to understand that forgiveness was not just an act of obedience, it was a reflection of God's love and grace. Through forgiveness, Anna experienced the fullness of God's mercy, and as she extended that mercy to others, she became more like Christ. She understood that forgiveness wasn't just something she did. It was something that God had called her to live out day by day in every moment of her life. As Anna's journey continued, she found herself living in a newfound freedom that she had never known before. The forgiveness that had once felt like a burden now felt like a liberation. The chains of bitterness and resentment that had held her captive for so long had been broken, and Anna was free to live fully and without the weight of past wounds. Forgiveness had done more than heal her heart. It had transformed her life. Anna found that, with each act of forgiveness, she was becoming more and more aligned with the person she was meant to be. The peace that had once seemed so distant was now her constant companion. The anger that had ruled her thoughts and actions for so long was no longer present. Instead, Anna found herself walking in the light of love, grace, and mercy. As Anna lived out this freedom, she began to experience a deeper relationship with God. She had always believed in His power and love, but now she understood it on a much deeper level. She realized that the forgiveness she had experienced was a reflection of God's love for her, a love that was unconditional and unchanging. By forgiving others, Anna was living out the very essence of God's heart, and she could feel His presence in her life in a way that she had never experienced before. This deeper connection with God led Anna to a life filled with purpose. She began to see her struggles, her pain, and her past not as obstacles, but as stepping stones to her spiritual growth. She understood that everything she had been through, including the betrayal, had been a part of God's plan to shape her into the person she was meant to become. The pain, though difficult, had allowed her to experience the fullness of God's grace and mercy, and in turn, it had equipped her to share that grace with others. Anna also began to see the power of forgiveness in the lives of those around her. As she shared her story and the lessons she had learned, she saw others begin to embrace forgiveness as well. Her family, her friends, and even strangers who heard her testimony began to experience the transformative power of forgiveness. Anna realized that forgiveness was not just a personal journey, it was a gift to be shared with the world. By forgiving, she had not only healed her own heart, but had become a source of healing for others. Forgiveness had set Anna free in ways she never imagined. It had freed her from the pain of her past, the bitterness in her heart, and the barriers that had separated her from others. It had opened her heart to love, compassion, and grace. And most importantly, it had opened the door to a deeper relationship with God, one that was built on trust, love, and forgiveness. Today, Anna's life is a testimony to the power of forgiveness. She no longer lives in the shadow of her past. Instead, she walks in the light of freedom, love, and grace. She knows that forgiveness is not just a one-time decision. It is a lifelong journey, one that continues to bring healing, restoration, and peace. Forgiveness has not only healed her heart, but it has also given her the freedom to live the life God has called her to live, a life of love, purpose, and grace. As Anna's story comes to an end, it is clear that forgiveness is not just a singular event, but a continuous journey. What began as a painful, difficult choice to let go of anger and bitterness has transformed Anna's life in ways she never expected. Through forgiveness, Anna has not only healed her heart, but she has also discovered a deeper, more meaningful relationship with herself, with others, and with God. Forgiveness, as Anna discovered, is not a one-time decision. It is a constant choice that we make every day. Each day presents new challenges and opportunities to forgive, whether it is letting go of past hurts or choosing to release the small offenses that can easily build up and harden our hearts. Anna learned that forgiveness is not about excusing the wrongs that have been done to us, but about freeing ourselves from the emotional and spiritual weight that unforgiveness brings. The power of forgiveness is immense. It is not just for the person who hurt us, it is for us. Forgiveness allows us to release the chains that bind us to past pain and opens the door to healing, peace, and spiritual freedom. By choosing to forgive, we invite God's healing into our lives, allowing His grace to wash over us and restore our souls. It is through forgiveness that we find true freedom, not just in our relationships with others, but in our relationship with ourselves and with God. Anna's journey has shown us that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of strength. It takes great courage to release the pain, the anger, and the resentment that we have carried for so long. But when we make the choice to forgive, we empower ourselves to live fully and freely. We no longer allow our past to dictate our present. Instead, we choose to live in the freedom that forgiveness brings. Forgiveness is also about reconciliation. Reconciliation with others, with ourselves, and with God. Anna's journey wasn't just about letting go of the past, it was about rebuilding relationships that had been fractured by hurt and betrayal. It was about embracing grace, understanding and love in a way that allowed her to restore what had been broken. Forgiveness opened the door to reconciliation and gave Anna the chance to build deeper, more meaningful relationships. Most importantly, forgiveness allowed Anna to experience the love and grace of God in a way that transformed her life. Through forgiveness, Anna discovered that God's love is unconditional, unchanging, and ever-present. It is in forgiving others that we reflect God's love and mercy, and it is in forgiving ourselves that we make space for His healing to take root in our hearts. Forgiveness is a divine gift, one that frees us from the bonds of resentment and allows us to walk in the fullness of God's love. As we reflect on Anna's story, we are reminded that forgiveness is a powerful force, a force that can heal hearts, restore relationships, and bring peace to our lives. It is a force that transcends human understanding, a force that transforms pain into peace, bitterness into love, and sorrow into joy. Forgiveness is not just a choice, it is a journey that leads to healing, freedom, and spiritual renewal.